The sun hung over Southampton like a freshly minted gold coin, ostentatious and blinding. Walter Wilson felt its heat on his shoulders, a pleasant weight that mirrored the warmth of Teresa Bennett's hand in his. Her laughter, a sound engineered for brunch menus and yacht decks, tinkled beside him. This was his life now, a curated postcard of success. The crisp white linen of his shirt, the soft sand giving way under Italian leather loafers, the woman beside him, whose beauty was both a comfort and a statement. It was perfect. It was a lie. And then he saw her. The world slowed to the syrupy pace of a bad dream. Among the scattered families and laughing teenagers, a lone figure walked near the water's edge. Her pregnancy was unmistakable, a proud, defiant curve against the endless blue of the Atlantic. She wore a simple sundress, faded to the color of a pale sky, and her dark hair was a tangled mess whipped by the salt-laced wind. It was the way she moved, a slight limp she'd had since a childhood fall, a stubborn set to her shoulders. That struck him first. It was a familiarity that bypassed his brain and punched straight into his gut. Cara. His breath hitched. He hadn't seen her in 8 months. Not since the lawyers had finished sanitizing their shared life, scrubbing away the vows and leaving behind only the sterile language of settlement agreements. He'd told himself it was for the best, a clean break. He'd sent the checks, insulated himself with work and the seamless companionship of Teresa, and had almost convinced himself that Cara Palmer had simply ceased to exist. But here she was, a ghost in the Hampton sun, impossibly real and devastatingly pregnant. His child. The thought was a physical blow, knocking the air from his lungs. He remembered the last conversation, a frantic, tear-choked call he'd taken on his way to a board meeting. "I'm pregnant, Walt. Please, we need to talk." He'd dismissed it. A desperate, final play. He'd told her to have her lawyer contact his. The memory was acid in his throat. "Walter, darling, you look like you've seen a ghost," Teresa murmured, her fingers tightening on his hand. Her voice, usually a soothing balm, was now a grating intrusion. He couldn't answer. His gaze was locked on Cara. She stopped walking, one hand going to the small of her back, the other cradling her belly. Her face, even from this distance, was etched with a profound weariness that felt like his own personal indictment. The ocean breeze pressed the thin fabric of her dress against her, outlining the swell of her stomach, the new and sacred shape of her. A shape he had helped create and then abandoned. Public shame, a feeling he hadn't experienced since he was a child who'd wet his pants in class, washed over him. He was Walter Wilson, a titan of private equity, a man whose image was as carefully managed as his portfolio, and 50 yards away was the living, breathing, pregnant proof of his most profound failure. People were watching. He could feel their eyes, the whispers that would soon ignite across the social circuits of the East Coast. Cara took another step, then faltered. Her body swayed, a fragile reed in the wind. Her hand shot from her belly to her head, as if trying to hold herself together. Her knees buckled. "Oh my God," Teresa breathed, a note of theatrical horror in her voice. "Is that woman okay?" Time seemed to fracture. One part of him, the cold, calculating part that had built his empire, was screaming at him to turn, to walk away, to pretend he saw nothing. It was a PR disaster, a personal cataclysm. Teresa was already pulling on his arm, her instinct for self-preservation kicking in. "Walter, let's go. We shouldn't get involved." But his feet were rooted to the spot. He saw Cara's face, pale as the sea foam, her eyes rolling back in her head. She crumpled. Not in a gentle faint, but in a sudden, sickening collapse, her body hitting the wet sand with a soft thud that echoed like a gunshot in the sudden silence of his mind. A collective gasp rippled through the beachgoers. People started running toward her. A woman screamed for someone to call 911. The perfect, curated postcard of his life had just been set on fire. For a frozen moment, he was just a man watching the mother of his unborn child lie unconscious on the sand. The title, the wealth, the mistress, it all dissolved into the salty air, leaving behind only the raw, burning agony of his betrayal. The lie he had built was collapsing just as surely as she had, and in its wreckage he could only stare, paralyzed by the enormity of what he had done. Teresa's voice was sharp now, laced with panic. "Walter, for God's sake! People are staring at us! Let's get out of here before someone recognizes you!" Her words finally broke the spell. But he didn't turn away. He pulled his hand from hers and took a staggering step forward, toward the chaos, toward the woman he had tried to erase, toward the collapsing ruin of his life. The sterile, antiseptic smell of St. Catherine's Hospital was a slap in the face, a harsh reality after the open, salty air of the beach. Walter strode through the automatic doors, his mind a maelstrom of panic and guilt. He'd left Teresa fuming in the car, her protests about optics and scandal fading into the roar of his own heartbeat. He'd followed the ambulance, driving his Aston Martin with a reckless abandon that mirrored the chaos inside him. He reached the emergency reception desk, his voice clipped and authoritative. "I'm here for Cara Palmer. She was just brought in from the beach." The receptionist, a stout woman with tired eyes named Marge, looked up from her computer, unimpressed by his tailored suit or the urgency in his tone. "Are you family?" The question hung in the air, a simple, bureaucratic inquiry that cut him to the bone. He hesitated. I'm her ex-husband." The words tasted like ash. Marge's fingers tapped on the keyboard. "Her emergency contact is listed as a Donald Spurlock. He's already on his way. I'm sorry, sir, but due to HIPAA regulations, I can only give information to immediate family or the designated contact. I'm the father of her child," he bit out, the words feeling both like a desperate claim and a damning confession. The woman's expression didn't soften. If anything, a flicker of disapproval crossed her face. "That doesn't change the paperwork, sir. You'll have to wait in the designated waiting area." She gestured vaguely toward a collection of unforgiving plastic chairs where people sat in various states of anxious dread. Powerless. He, Walter Wilson, who could get the mayor on the phone with a single text, was being stonewalled by a hospital receptionist. The irony was suffocating. He had willingly signed the papers that had severed their legal ties, effectively erasing his right to be here, to know if she was okay, if their baby was okay. It was a self-inflicted wound, and it was bleeding him dry. He retreated to the waiting area, the harsh fluorescent lights exposing every flaw in his composure. He pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over Teresa's name. A dozen texts had already come through. "This is a nightmare, Walt. My phone is blowing up. Did you have to run after her like that? Think of the pictures. My agent just called. Page 6 is asking for a comment. We need to get ahead of this. Call Anthony. Now." He ignored them all. His mind flashed back to another call, months ago. He'd been in a town car, stuck in Manhattan traffic on his way to close the Henderson deal. Cara's name had flashed on the screen. He'd let it go to voicemail, annoyed at the interruption. He'd listened to it later, her voice small and trembling. "Walt, I didn't want to do this over the phone. I'm pregnant. I know everything is a mess, but it's yours. Please, can we just talk? Not with lawyers, just us?" He'd deleted the message. He'd rationalized it as a pathetic, last-ditch effort to claw her way back into his life, to get a bigger settlement. He'd instructed his lawyer, Anthony Jenkins, to make it clear that all communication should go through legal channels. He had built a wall of money and lawyers around himself, and now he was on the wrong side of it, desperate to get in. A doctor in blue scrubs emerged from a set of double doors, his face grim. Walter shot to his feet, but the doctor walked past him to an elderly couple huddled in the corner. Walter sank back into his chair, the brief surge of adrenaline leaving him feeling hollowed out. He was a ghost here, a spectre of a past life with no rights in the present. He had paid a fortune to become a stranger to Kara, and the universe, it seemed, had cashed the check. Every tick of the clock on the wall was a fresh torment. Was she awake? Was the baby alive? The questions were a relentless drumbeat against the inside of his skull. He thought of her falling, the way her body had simply given out. Had she been alone all this time, struggling, while he was picking out wine pairings with Teresa and pretending his past didn't exist? The weight of his emotional abandonment settled on him, heavy and suffocating. It wasn't just the divorce, the affair. It was the deliberate, calculated way he had silenced her, refused her humanity, treated her pleas as a business nuisance to be managed. Finally, an older man with a kind, weathered face and a shock of white hair hurried into the waiting room. He exuded a quiet strength, his expression a mixture of fear and fierce protectiveness. He went straight to the desk. "I'm Donald Spurlock. I'm here for Kara Palmer." Marge's demeanor changed instantly. "Of course, Mr. Spurlock. Right this way. Dr. Evans is waiting to speak with you." As Donald passed, his eyes met Walter's. There was no flicker of surprise, only a deep, bottomless contempt that was more cutting than any verbal assault could ever be. In that one look, Walter saw himself as Donald must see him. A destructive force, a man who broke beautiful things and walked away from the wreckage. Donald didn't say a word. He just held Walter's gaze for a second longer, before disappearing through the double doors, leaving Walter alone in the waiting room, a king dethroned in a kingdom of plastic chairs and sterile silence. An hour crawled by, each minute an eternity. Walter paced the small waiting area, ignoring the insistent buzzing of his phone. He'd finally texted Anthony Jenkins a single, terse message. "Handle the press." No comment. It was a reflex, a move from his corporate playbook, but it felt utterly hollow. The double doors swung open again. Donald Spurlock emerged, his face still grim, but the sharp edge of panic softened into something more like weary resolve. Walter immediately closed the distance between them. "How is she?" Walter's voice was raw. Donald stopped, regarding him with the same cold disdain as before. "She's stable. The baby is too for now. Severe dehydration, exhaustion, and a spike in blood pressure. The doctor called it a preeclamptic warning. They're keeping her for observation." Relief, so potent it made him dizzy, washed over Walter. "Thank God, can I see her?" Donald's laugh was a short, bitter bark. "You honestly think you have the right to ask that? After everything? She's carrying my child, Donald. I have every right. A right you forfeited when you sent her process servers instead of answering her phone calls," Donald shot back, his voice low but vibrating with anger. "A right you signed away in a document that paid you for the privilege of your own absence. You don't get to show up now, smelling of expensive cologne and guilt, and pretend you're anything other than the cause of this." Every word was a perfectly aimed dart, and they all hit their mark. "I didn't know," Walter said, the excuse sounding pathetic even to his own ears. "I thought she was—" "You thought she was lying? Trying to manipulate you?" Donald finished, his eyes boring into Walter's. "Because that's what you do, isn't it, Walter? You assess people as threats or assets. Kara was an asset until she wasn't, so you liquidated her. Did you ever, for 1 second, stop to consider she was just a person? A terrified, pregnant woman who you once promised to love and protect? The truth of the accusation left him speechless. He had done that. He had reduced the woman he'd once loved, the woman who knew his fears and his dreams, to a line item in a ledger of his life he was trying to close. "I want to see her," Walter repeated, his voice quieter now, stripped of its usual authority. It was a plea. Donald studied him for a long moment, a silent battle playing out behind his eyes. "She's sleeping," he finally said. "The doctor gave her a mild sedative. I'll ask her when she wakes up. But I'm telling you now, Walter, if she says no, you will turn around and you will walk out of this hospital. You will not cause another scene. You have done enough damage for one lifetime." He had no choice but to agree. He retreated to his chair, feeling like a supplicant. Another hour passed. Finally, Donald reappeared at the doorway and gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod. Walter's heart hammered against his ribs as he followed Donald down the hallway. The air grew quieter, filled with the soft beeps and whirs of medical machinery. They stopped outside a room, number 314. Donald paused, his hand on the door. "She's awake. She agreed to see you for 5 minutes. Don't you dare upset her." Walter nodded, his throat tight. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. Kara was propped up by pillows, an IV line taped to the back of her hand. The color had returned to her cheeks, but her eyes were shadowed with exhaustion. She looked fragile, yet her gaze, when it landed on him, was as hard as steel. The silence in the room was thick with unspoken history, with betrayal and pain. "Kara," he breathed her name. "What do you want, Walter?" Her voice was raspy but steady. There was no pleading, no tears, just a chilling emptiness. He moved closer to the bed, his hands feeling useless at his sides. "I'm so sorry. I saw you on the beach. I had no idea." "No idea I was still pregnant?" she asked, a flicker of bitter amusement in her eyes. "Or no idea I was poor enough to walk on a public beach instead of lounging at a private club? That's not fair." "Fair." She let out a weak, incredulous laugh. "You want to talk about fair? Fair was me calling you, begging you to just talk to me, and getting a letter from your lawyer threatening me with a harassment claim. Fair was me finding out you were vacationing in St. Bart's with her from a gossip magazine while I was throwing up every morning, terrified I was going to lose this baby." He flinched. "I can help. Whatever you need. Money, doctors, a place to live, anything. Just name it." It was his default setting, his solution to every problem. Write a check. Her expression hardened into something close to disgust. "You still don't get it, do you? You think you can abandon a person and then just buy your way back into their life when it's convenient? This isn't a hostile takeover, Walter. This is a baby. My baby. A human life. And it's not for sale." The rejection was absolute. A door slammed shut in his face. She wasn't asking for his money. She was demanding his humanity, the very part of himself he had systematically dismantled to achieve his success. "What do you want from me, then?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Right now?" she said, her eyes welling up with tears she refused to let fall. "I want you to leave. Your 5 minutes are up." He stood there, frozen, the chasm between them wider than ever. He had come here to fix things, to manage the situation. But he was realizing, with a clarity that was both terrifying and liberating, that some things couldn't be bought, fixed, or managed. Some debts were paid not in dollars but in something far more costly, and he hadn't even begun to understand the currency. The drive back to his sterile, glass-walled beach house was a blur. Walter walked in to find Teresa on the phone, her voice a carefully modulated blend of outrage and victimhood. She was pacing the marble floor of the living room, a flute of champagne in her hand. "Unbelievable, I know," He just left me there. Of course, my concern is for the woman, but the absolute humiliation. She saw him and her expression hardened. I have to call you back. She ended the call and rounded on him. Well, is your little charity case sorted? The casual cruelty of her words hit him like a physical blow. Her name is Kara, he said, his voice dangerously low. And she collapsed. She's in the hospital. She could have lost the baby. Oh, please, Teresa scoffed, taking a delicate sip of champagne. How terribly dramatic and convenient, right when you happen to be walking by. Don't you see what this is, Walter? It's a setup. She's a gold digger, and she just hit the jackpot. The press is going to have a field day with the story of the poor, pregnant ex-wife collapsing at the feet of the callous millionaire and his new girlfriend. It's not a story, Teresa. It's my life. It's our life, she snapped, her composure finally cracking. The life I have worked very hard to build with you. The brand, the image. Do you have any idea what this does to us? To me? I'm not just your girlfriend. I'm a brand ambassador. My reputation is tied to yours. This mess you've made. It threatens everything. He looked at her then. Truly looked at her. He saw the perfectly styled hair, the designer dress, the panicked, calculating gleam in her eyes. He had chosen her because she was easy. She was uncomplicated, a beautiful accessory that asked for nothing more than what his money could provide. She was the antithesis of Kara, who had challenged him, who had demanded his heart, his attention, his soul. He had fled from that complexity into this gilded, empty cage. This isn't about a brand, he said, the realization dawning on him with sickening clarity. This is about a child. My child. Teresa's face twisted into a mask of fury and fear. So that's it? She snaps her fingers and you go running back to her? After everything I've done for you. I stood by you through that ugly divorce. I helped you rebuild your image. You helped me build a lie, he countered, the words tasting bitter. And it just came crashing down on the beach. She stalked toward him, her eyes blazing. You need to handle this, Walter. You need to shut her down. Pay her off. Get her to sign a non-disclosure agreement, so tight she can't even whisper her own name. If you don't, she will poison everything. She is a threat to us. To me. And you need to decide who you're protecting. The threat was clear. It wasn't just about PR. It was about her position, her security. Kara and the baby were an existential threat to the world Teresa had so carefully constructed. Later that afternoon, Anthony Jenkins arrived at the house. His face, usually a mask of professional calm, was etched with concern. He carried a leather briefcase and a heavy silence. It's bad, Walt, he said, forgoing any pleasantries as he sat across from Walter in the cavernous living room. Page 6 has the story. So does the Daily Mail. Photos are already circulating. Billionaire ignores pregnant ex-wife's beach collapse. They're painting you as a monster. Walter ran a hand over his face. I know. Teresa is convinced Kara planned the whole thing. Anthony raised an eyebrow. And you believe that? No, Walter admitted quietly. I saw her face, Anthony. She was just tired. Worn out. The optics are a nightmare, Anthony continued, all business. But the legal implications are what you should be worried about. You have a signed settlement. It's ironclad. But a child changes the equation. Paternity will need to be established. And if it's yours, child support will be revisited. And given your net worth and this public incident, her lawyers could argue for a substantial increase, citing emotional distress. Walter waved a dismissive hand. I don't care about the money. That's not what this is about. Anthony leaned forward, his lawyerly facade dropping for a moment to reveal the friend beneath. Then what is it about, Walt? Because for the last 8 months, it's been all about the money. It's been about protecting your assets, minimizing your exposure, and moving on as cleanly as possible. I made a mistake, Walter said, his voice barely a whisper. A colossal mistake. I saw her lying on that sand, and nothing else mattered. Not the money, not the business, not Teresa. Nothing. I have a child on the way, Anthony, and I've been acting like it doesn't exist. So what are you going to do? The question hung in the air, simple and monumental. For his entire adult life, his course of action had always been clear. Identify the problem, strategize, and execute a solution that maximized his advantage. But this wasn't a business deal. There was no leverage to be had, no victory to be won. There was only a woman he had wronged, and a child he had yet to meet. I don't know, he confessed, the admission feeling like a surrender. For the first time in my life, I have no idea what to do. Teresa's parting words echoed in his mind. She will poison everything. He was beginning to realize the well was already poisoned, and he was the one who had done it. The choice wasn't about protecting himself from Kara. It was about whether he could find an antidote for the poison he had put into the world himself. For 2 days, Walter was adrift. He stayed at the beach house, a prisoner in his own opulent fortress. Teresa had decamped to the city, leaving behind a wake of angry texts and the lingering scent of her expensive perfume. He ignored the relentless calls from his office, the concerned emails from his board. The world he had so meticulously built felt distant and insignificant, a stage set for a play he no longer wanted to be in. His thoughts were consumed by Kara. He imagined her in that sterile hospital room, alone. He replayed their last, brutal conversation. This isn't a hostile takeover, Walter. Her words had stripped him bare, exposing the flawed mechanics of his soul. He couldn't buy his way back. He couldn't litigate his way back. So what was left? He called Donald Spurlock. The older man picked up on the 4th ring, his voice wary. What do you want, Walter? I just wanted to know how she's doing, if she's home yet. There was a long pause. They released her this morning. I took her back to her apartment. She's on strict bed rest for the next week. Her apartment. Walter pictured the small, 4th-floor walk-up they had rented when they were first married, before the money had rolled in and changed everything. Is she still in the city? No, Donald said, a hint of accusation in his tone. She couldn't afford it after the settlement. She's in a small place in Bayshore. It's all she could manage. Bayshore. A working-class town on the south shore of Long Island, a world away from the manicured lawns of Southampton. The image of his pregnant ex-wife, ordered to bed, rest in a tiny apartment, sent a fresh wave of shame through him. Is there anything she needs? Walter asked, bracing for another rejection. And I don't mean money. I mean, practically. Does she need groceries? Someone to run errands? Donald was silent for a moment, surprised by the question. She's stubborn, he said finally. She won't accept anything from you. But the air conditioner in her building is broken. It's an old unit in the window, and with this heat wave, her apartment is an oven. The landlord is dragging his feet. It's not good for her, with the blood pressure issues. An idea sparked in Walter's mind. A small, tangible thing. An action, not a word or a check. Thank you, Donald. He hung up and immediately got to work. He didn't call an assistant. He didn't delegate. He spent an hour online, researching the best portable air conditioning units, the quietest and most energy-efficient models. He found a 24-hour appliance store in Riverhead, drove there himself in a nondescript SUV from his garage, and paid in cash for the top-of-the-line model. He then called an HVAC technician he'd used for one of his commercial properties, a reliable guy named Sal, and offered him triple his usual rate to drive to Bay Shore and install it immediately. He gave Sal only one instruction: do not mention my name. Tell her the landlord sent you. For the rest of the day, he waited, pacing his house like a caged animal. He didn't know if his plan would work, if Kara would even accept it. It felt like a pathetically small gesture in the face of his monumental failures, like trying to patch a sinking ship with a single piece of tape. But it was something. It was an act. Late that evening, his phone rang. It was an unknown number. He answered, his heart pounding. "Hello? It was you, wasn't it?" Kara's voice. It wasn't angry, just tired and filled with a weary resignation. He sank onto the edge of his bed. "How did you know? The unit costs more than 3 months of my rent, Walter. My landlord wouldn't spend that kind of money if the building was on fire. Plus, the technician left the invoice in the box by mistake." He closed his eyes. I heard it was hot. Donald said..." "You talked to Donald?" "I called to see how you were," he said quietly. "He told me you were home. Kara, I know you don't want my help, but I couldn't stand the thought of you in that heat, especially after what the doctor said." There was a long stretch of silence on the line. He could hear the faint, soft hum of the air conditioner in the background, a quiet testament to his small act of contrition. "Thank you," she said finally. The words were soft, almost hesitant, but they landed with the force of a physical impact. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't absolution, but it was an acknowledgement, a tiny crack in the wall of ice between them. "You're welcome," he whispered. "Why are you doing this, Walter?" she asked, her voice laced with a suspicion he knew he deserved. "What do you want?" He thought for a moment, searching for the most honest answer he could find. The corporate spin, the legal maneuvering, it all fell away. "I don't know what I want," he said, the truth of it raw and exposed. "I just know that what I was doing before was wrong. I was wrong, and I'm trying. I'm just trying to be a little less wrong." Another silence stretched between them, this one less tense, more contemplative. He heard her take a deep, slow breath, a sound of comfort made possible by the cool air he had provided. "The baby kicked today," she said, her voice changing, softening. For the first time, it felt like a little flutter. The word stole his breath. He pictured it, her hand on her stomach, the secret, miraculous movement beneath. A life he had co-created and then ignored was making itself known. "A flutter," he repeated, a lump forming in his throat. "Yeah," she said. "I should go. I need to rest." "Okay," he said. "Kara, take care of yourself. Please." She hung up without saying goodbye. But it didn't matter. For the first time in almost a year, they had shared something other than anger and legal documents. It was a fragile, tenuous thread of connection, but it was there. He sat in the silent, cavernous house, the quiet hum of their conversation echoing in his ears, and felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in a very long time. A terrifying, exhilarating sliver of hope. The juxtaposition was jarring. One moment, Walter was in a sterile boardroom on the 50th floor of his Manhattan skyscraper, a predator in his natural habitat. He was tearing apart a subordinate's quarterly projections, his voice a cold, precise instrument of intellectual dominance. Men who managed billion-dollar funds withered under his gaze. He was in complete control, the master of his universe. "These numbers are lazy, Mark," he said, sliding the report across the polished mahogany table. "They're based on last year's market, They don't account for the volatility in the Asian sector. Do it again. And this time, try thinking. The dismissal was absolute. The meeting ended. As his team filed out, their faces a mixture of fear and resentment, Walter felt nothing. This world, once the source of all his power and validation, now felt like a hollow performance. His phone buzzed on the table. A text from Donald. Kara has her 20-week ultrasound this afternoon. 2 p.m. Dr. Miller's office. Just thought you should know. Walter stared at the message. It wasn't an invitation. It was a test. A piece of information laid at his feet, leaving the next move entirely up to him. He looked at his calendar. A 2 p.m. conference call with investors in Tokyo. A deal worth hundreds of millions. He typed a quick reply to his assistant. Cancel the 2 p.m. family emergency. An hour and a half later, he was standing in the parking lot of a low-slung medical building in a quiet Long Island suburb. He wore a simple polo shirt and slacks, a conscious effort to shed the corporate armor he'd worn just hours before. He felt profoundly out of place, an intruder in a world of expectant mothers and nervous fathers. He walked in and saw Kara in the waiting room, her head bent over a parenting magazine. She was alone. He hesitated at the door, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. This was a terrible idea. She would see him, she would get angry, and he would undo the fragile progress he'd made. But the thought of his child being seen for the first time, a flicker of life on a screen, and him not being there to witness it, was unbearable. It was a moment that could never be reclaimed. He took a breath and walked over, stopping a few feet from her chair. Kara, she looked up, and her eyes widened in surprise, followed by a flash of her default setting, defensiveness. Walter, what are you doing here? Donald told me, he said simply. I know I wasn't invited. I won't stay if you don't want me to. I can wait in the car. I wanted to be nearby. His deference, his willingness to be dismissed, seemed to disarm her. She studied his face, searching for an ulterior motive. He met her gaze steadily, letting her see the raw, unvarnished truth of his anxiety and his hope. The technician can be chatty, she said after a long moment, a slight frown on her face. It might be awkward. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. I can be quiet, he promised. When the nurse called her name, she stood up and, with a barely perceptible nod in his direction, walked toward the examination rooms. He followed at a respectful distance, his hands sweating. The room was small and dim. Kara lay on the examination table, while the technician, a cheerful woman named Linda, bustled around her. Walter stood against the far wall, trying to make himself as small as possible, feeling like a clumsy giant in this intimate, sacred space. Linda squeezed cold gel onto Kara's belly, and Kara flinched. Walter felt a bizarre, protective urge, a desire to warm the gel for her. The technician pressed a transducer to her skin, and a grainy black and white world appeared on the monitor beside the bed. Okay, let's see what we've got here, Linda chirped. She moved the wand, and shapes swirled into focus. There's the head, and a little arm. See that? Walter's breath caught in his throat. It was real. A tiny, moving, living being. He saw the elegant curve of a spine, the frantic, beautiful flicker of a heartbeat. It was a galaxy unto itself, a miracle unfolding in monochrome on a small screen. Heartbeat is strong, Linda said. 155 beats per minute. Perfect. He chanced a look at Kara. Her head was turned toward the monitor, her face transformed. The hardness, the anger, the weariness, it had all melted away, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated awe and love. A single tear traced a path down her temple and into her hair. In that moment, She was not his angry ex-wife. She was simply a mother, gazing at her child for the first time, and the love he saw on her face was so powerful, so absolute, it broke something open inside him. The selfishness, the pride, the fear that had driven him for so long. It all seemed pathetic in the face of this profound, elemental truth. "Would you like to find out the gender?" Linda asked. Kara hesitated, then looked at Walter. It was the first time she had voluntarily sought his input on anything. The question hung between them, a silent offering. He found his voice, surprised by its steadiness. "It's up to you, Kara. Whatever you want." She gave a small, tremulous smile. "Let's wait," she said to Linda. "I think I'd like a surprise." He watched the rest of the exam in a daze, his mind reeling. He had seen his child. He had seen the love on Kara's face. He had been included, however tentatively, in a moment of staggering importance. When it was over, he walked with her back to the waiting room. The silence between them was different now, filled not with anger, but with a shared, unspoken reverence for what they had just witnessed. "Thank you," he said, as she turned to leave. "For letting me be here." She paused at the door, her back to him. "The baby deserves a father, Walter," she said softly, without turning around. "I just don't know if you can be one." She walked out, leaving him alone with the after-image of a tiny, flickering heartbeat and the weight of her final words. It wasn't a promise. It was a challenge, and for the first time, he felt ready to accept it. Walter's decision to dismantle his life with Teresa was not a single, explosive event. It was a quiet, internal demolition. After the ultrasound, the artifice of their relationship became unbearable. Her laughter sounded hollow, her touch felt cloying, her concerns about social standing seemed laughably trivial. He was a man haunted by the ghost of a future he had almost thrown away, and she was the embodiment of the life that had required that sacrifice. He became distant, preoccupied. He spent more time at his city apartment than at the Southampton house. He cancelled dinners, ignored her calls for hours at a time, and answered her questions about his day with vague, one-word answers. He knew it was cowardly, but he didn't have the strength for a confrontation. He was saving all his emotional energy for the fragile, tentative bridge he was trying to build back to Kara. Teresa, however, was not one to be quietly discarded. She was a fighter, and her primary instinct was survival. She felt him slipping away and interpreted it not as a change of heart, but as a strategic move by her rival. In her mind, Kara was playing a masterful game, and Teresa was losing. Her panic began to curdle into a venomous desperation. The attack, when it came, was meticulously planned and brutally effective. Walter was in his office when Anthony Jenkins walked in, his face pale, and dropped a tablet onto his desk. On the screen was a popular, notoriously vicious gossip blog. The headline screamed, "Exclusive, Millionaire Walter Wilson's victim, ex-wife's secret betrayal. Was the baby a trap?" Walter's blood ran cold as he read. The article was a masterpiece of character assassination, filled with anonymous quotes from sources close to the couple. It painted Kara as a manipulative gold digger who had been cheating on Walter for months before their split. It alleged that she had stopped taking her birth control without his knowledge in a last-ditch effort to trap him. It even floated the insidious suggestion that the baby might not be his. The beach collapse was framed as a calculated, theatrical performance designed to elicit public sympathy and a larger payout. And woven throughout the article were specific, private details. The name of a restaurant where he and Kara had a fight, a reference to a vacation they'd taken, the model of the car he'd bought her for her birthday. Details that only one other person could have known: Teresa. The betrayal was so profound, so venomous it left him breathless. She hadn't just attacked Kara. She had taken their shared history, the intimate details of his former marriage that he had foolishly shared with her in moments of misplaced confidence, and weaponized them. He called her immediately. She answered on the first ring, her voice cloyingly sweet. "Walter, darling, I was just thinking of you. You did this," he said, his voice a low, trembling growl. "You leaked this story." There was a brief pause. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but the denial was thin, brittle. "Don't lie to me, Teresa. The details, the restaurant in Tuscany, the fight about her mother's medical bills. That was you. You fed them this poison." Her tone shifted, the sweetness evaporating to reveal the hard, cold fury beneath. She deserved it. She was trying to destroy us. I did what I had to do to protect what's mine. To protect you. You're too soft on her, Walter. You let her play the victim, and you fall for it every time. Someone had to fight back. By printing lies about the mother of my child, he roared, rising from his chair, his control shattering. By suggesting she was cheating on me. By questioning the paternity of my own baby. This isn't fighting back, Teresa. This is scorched earth. This is evil. Don't you dare take the moral high ground with me, she shrieked back. You're the one who cheated on her in the first place. I'm just cleaning up your mess. This is how the game is played, Walter. You taught me that yourself, and in that moment, he saw the grotesque reflection of his own worst tendencies. He had sought out a woman who understood power, who saw life as a series of strategic moves. He had taught her his ruthless, transactional worldview, and now she was using it against him, against the one thing that had begun to matter. He had created his own monster. It's over, Teresa, he said, his voice suddenly calm, chillingly devoid of emotion. Pack your things. Get out of the beach house. Get out of my life. A car will be at the city apartment in an hour to take you wherever you want to go. Send my lawyer a list of your things. They will be forwarded to you. You can't do this, she screamed, her voice rising in panic. Walter, don't you dare do this to me. After everything, I will not be discarded. You were never anything more to me than a distraction, he said, the words as cruel as they were true. And the distraction is over. He hung up the phone, his hand trembling. The fury receded, replaced by a cold, sickening dread. He thought of Kara, alone in her small apartment, probably seeing this article right now. This public humiliation, this vile attack, was happening because of him. He had brought Teresa into his life, and in doing so, he had brought this blight upon Kara. He had ended things with Teresa, but the damage was already done. He had finally burned the bridge to his past, but in doing so, he had set fire to the very ground where he was trying to build a new foundation. He picked up his phone, his thumb hovering over Kara's name, knowing with absolute certainty that this time an air conditioner wouldn't be enough to fix what he had allowed to be broken. The call to Kara was the hardest he had ever made. He expected screaming, crying, accusations. He got something far worse, a quiet, bone-deep exhaustion. I saw it, Walter, she said, before he could even apologize. Her voice was flat, hollowed out. One of my friends from work sent me the link. Congratulations. You've successfully painted me as a cheating, manipulative whore to the entire world. Kara, I am so sorry. It was Teresa. I ended it. It's over. I swear to you I had nothing to do with it. It doesn't matter if you did it or if you just stood by and let it happen, she replied, her voice cracking with a pain that cut him to the quick. The result is the same. My name is Mud. My picture is everywhere. People I know are looking at me differently. Do you have any idea what that feels like? He didn't. He had always been the one in control of the narrative, the one who paid publicists to shape his image. He had never been on the receiving end of a public vivisection. "I'm going to fix this," he vowed, falling back on his old instincts. "I'll have Anthony issue a statement. We'll sue the blog for libel. I will spend whatever it takes to clear your name." "No," she said, her voice firm. "No more statements. No more lawyers. No more public battles. That's your world, Walter, not mine. Every time you try to fix things, you just make a bigger mess. Just stay away from me. Please, I can't take any more of this. I need to protect myself. I need to protect this baby." She hung up. The finality in her voice was absolute. He had been shut out completely. For the first week, he honored her request. It was agony. He felt like a phantom limb, an amputated part of a family he was desperate to rejoin. The silence was a roaring in his ears. He instructed Anthony to issue a single, terse statement. "The story is a malicious fabrication. Mr. Wilson has the utmost respect for his ex-wife, Ms. Palmer, and asks that the media respect her privacy during this time." He also had his legal team send a cease and desist letter, so menacing it made the blog retract the story within hours. But the damage was done. The lie was out there, living on social media, in the minds of strangers. He realized she was right. His methods, money, power, legal threats, were a foreign language in the country of her pain. They were the tools of the man who had hurt her, not the tools of the man who could possibly heal her. He needed a new currency, so he started showing up, not with grand gestures, but with quiet consistency. He learned her schedule from Donald. He knew her weekly obstetrician appointment was on Tuesday mornings. On the first Tuesday, he parked his car across the street from her apartment building at 8 a.m. At 8:30, he watched her emerge, her movements slow and careful, and begin the long, 4-block walk to the bus stop. He didn't approach her. He just watched, his heart aching with every step she took. The following Tuesday, he did the same thing. But this time, as she was locking her door, he sent a text. "My car is across the street. I can give you a ride to your appointment. I won't speak if you don't want me to. I'll just drive. If you don't want a ride, I'll understand." He watched as she read the message, her body tensing. She looked across the street and saw his car. For a full minute, she stood there, warring with herself. Then, with a deep sigh, she walked not toward the bus stop, but toward him. She got in the car and didn't say a word. He didn't either. He drove her to the doctor's office, the silence thick but not entirely hostile. It was a truce. When they arrived, she started to get out. "I'll wait here," he said, "to take you home." She paused, then gave a small, almost imperceptible nod and went inside. It became their weekly ritual. He would drive her. They would sit in silence. He would wait. He would take her home. It was a strange, silent penance. He was no longer her husband or her lover. He was her driver, a background character in the story of her pregnancy. But he was there. Slowly, other small acts followed. He knew from a passing comment Donald had made that she had a craving for a specific brand of pickles from a deli in the city. He drove into Manhattan, bought 3 jars, and left them in a bag outside her apartment door with a simple note. Just in case. He started reading. Not financial reports, but parenting books. What to expect when you're expecting. The happiest baby on the block. He read about trimesters and fetal development, about swaddling and sleep schedules. He filled the empty spaces of his life not with deals and conquests, but with knowledge about the child he was determined to know. One afternoon, driving her home from an appointment, she finally spoke. Why are you doing all this? She asked, her gaze fixed on the passing scenery. Because you told me the baby deserves a father, he replied honestly. And you were right. I'm trying to learn how to be one. Buying pickles and reading books doesn't make you a father, Walter. I know, he said. Being present does. Consistency, reliability, showing up. That's the stuff I failed at. That's what I'm trying to learn now. She was quiet for the rest of the ride. But when he pulled up to her building, she didn't get out immediately. The baby's room needs to be painted, she said, still not looking at him. And I can't do it myself. The fumes. It was the first time she had asked him for anything. Not money, not a grand gesture. Just for his time, his effort, his presence. What color? He asked, his heart swelling with a fragile, painful hope. A soft yellow, she said, like sunshine. I'll be here Saturday morning, he promised. With paint. She finally turned and looked at him. Her eyes were still guarded, her trust a distant shore he might never reach. But for the first time, he saw something other than pain in them. It was a flicker of acknowledgement, a recognition that his new currency, the simple, unglamorous currency of showing up, was finally beginning to register. Saturday came, and Walter arrived not in a sports car, but in a rented pickup truck, loaded with cans of low VOC paint, rollers, brushes, and drop cloths. He spent the entire day in Kara's small, stuffy spare room, methodically taping edges and rolling pale yellow paint onto the walls. Kara stayed in the living room, ostensibly on bed rest, but he could feel her presence, her quiet observation of his labor. They didn't talk much. He'd ask a question. Do you want me to do the trim in white? And she would give a simple answer. But the shared space, the domesticity of the task, began to erode the formal distance between them. He saw her world up close, the worn-out armchair, the second-hand books lining the shelves, the single framed photo of her late mother on the mantelpiece. This was the life she had built from the ashes of the one he had burned down. It was small and humble, but it was hers. And it was real. The quiet, consistent rhythm of their lives continued for weeks. Tuesday drives, occasional errands. He assembled a crib for her, his brow furrowed in concentration over inscrutable Swedish instructions. He installed baby gates, even though they were months away from being needed. Each task was a small, steady brick in a foundation he was desperately trying to lay. He was becoming a fixture, a reliable presence she no longer flinched at. The trust wasn't spoken, but it was there, a fragile seedling in the scorched earth of their past. Then came the call. It was just after 2 a.m. on a Tuesday in late autumn. He was asleep in his city apartment when his phone shrilled on the nightstand. He saw her name and was instantly awake, his blood turning to ice. Walter. Her voice was tight with pain, breathless. Kara, what's wrong? Is it the baby? I don't know, she gasped. I'm cramping. Badly. And I think my water just broke. It's too early, Walt. I'm only 34 weeks. Panic, cold and sharp, seized him. I'm on my way. Call 911. No, there's no time. I can't. Donald's in Florida visiting his sister. I tried calling a car service. They said it would be 40 minutes. Walter, please, I'm scared. The raw fear in her voice obliterated any remaining distance between them. She had called him. In her moment of terror, she had reached for him. I'm coming, he said, his voice a rock of calm he did not feel. Hang on, Kara. I'm coming. He moved faster than he ever had in his life, throwing on clothes, grabbing his keys. He broke every speed limit on the deserted late-night highways, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, his mind a frantic prayer. Please be okay. Please let the baby be okay." He found her on the floor of her living room, her face pale and beaded with sweat. He gently helped her to her feet, wrapped her in a blanket, and carried her down the 4 flights of stairs to his car. The drive to the hospital was a blur of red lights, and her sharp, pained gasps from the passenger seat. The emergency room staff swarmed them the moment he pulled up. They whisked her away on a gurney, her hand reaching back for his for a fleeting second before she disappeared through the double doors. And then he was alone again. Back in the waiting room where this nightmare had begun months ago. But this time it was different. He wasn't a ghost. When the nurse came to get information, he knew the answers. He knew her doctor's name, her due date, her allergies. He was listed on her intake form now, right below Donald, as an emergency contact. A small, bureaucratic change that felt like a seismic shift. Hours passed. He called Donald in Florida, who was beside himself with worry, and promised to get the first flight back. He paced. He drank bitter coffee from a vending machine. He prayed to a god he wasn't sure he believed in. Finally, just as the first grey light of dawn was breaking, Dr. Evans, the same doctor from before, appeared. Her face was tired but calm. "Mr. Wilson," he searched her face, bracing for the worst. Is the baby?" Kara had a placental abruption, likely related to her pre-eclampsia, the doctor explained. "It was critical. We had to perform an emergency C-section. But she's stable now. She's in recovery." He sagged against the wall in relief. "And the baby?" Dr. Evans smiled. "You have a daughter. She's small, 4 pounds, 6 ounces, and she's in the NICU as a precaution. But she's breathing on her own. She's a fighter, a daughter." The words resonated deep in his soul. He had a daughter. "Can I see them?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. "You can see your daughter now," she said. "Kara will be out of recovery in another hour or so." He followed a nurse through a labyrinth of hallways to the neonatal intensive care unit. After scrubbing his hands raw, he was led to a small, clear incubator. And there she was, so tiny, so impossibly perfect, with a dusting of dark hair just like her mother's. She was hooked up to monitors that beeped softly, but her tiny chest rose and fell with a steady, determined rhythm. He reached a hand through the portal and gently laid a finger on her tiny, grasping hand. Her fingers, impossibly small, curled around his. In that moment, the entire world fell away. The money, the power, the mistakes, the betrayals, none of it mattered. All that existed was the overwhelming, terrifying, unconditional love for this tiny, fragile human being. This was his daughter, his responsibility, his redemption. He didn't know how long he stood there, just watching her breathe. When he finally went to Kara's room, he found her awake, pale but lucid. He approached the bed, his heart too full for words. She looked at him, her eyes filled with the same awe and exhaustion he felt. "Have you seen her?" she whispered. He nodded, unable to speak. "She's so small," Kara said, a tear rolling down her cheek. "She's perfect," he managed to say. "She's beautiful, just like her mother." He sat in the chair beside her bed, and for the first time he took her hand. She didn't pull away. They sat in a shared, exhausted silence, no longer exes, no longer adversaries. They were simply two parents, bound together forever by the fierce, miraculous love for the tiny girl fighting for her life 1 floor below. The longest night of their lives was over, and in its wake, a new, uncertain day was dawning. 2 weeks later, the baby, whom Kara had named Hope, was released from the NICU. The apartment Walter had once seen as a symbol of her struggle was now a nursery, bathed in the soft yellow light of the walls he had painted. It was cluttered with diapers, bottles, and the beautiful chaos of a new life. Their new reality was a strange dance of co-parenting. It was not a romance rekindled. There were no grand declarations of love or forgiveness. Instead, their interactions were built on the mundane, essential logistics of keeping a tiny human alive. Their conversations were about feeding schedules, doctor's appointments, and whose turn it was to soothe the baby at 3 a.m. Yet, within this routine, something new was taking root. He saw the fierce, tireless love in the way Kara held Hope, the soft lullabies she sang when she thought no one was listening. And she saw him. She saw him expertly swaddle their daughter, a skill he'd learned from a YouTube video at 4 a.m. She saw him walk endless circles around the small living room, bouncing a fussy Hope on his shoulder until she finally drifted off to sleep. She saw him not as the millionaire who had abandoned her, but as Hope's father. A man who showed up, a man who stayed. This evening, an autumn chill rattled the window panes. Hope was asleep in her bassinet beside the couch, making soft, snuffly noises. Walter had just finished washing the dinner dishes, take-out Chinese eaten out of cartons, while Kara watched him, a thoughtful, unreadable expression on her face. He dried his hands and sat in the worn-out armchair across from her. The silence was comfortable now, a shared space rather than an empty one. "Donald called today," she said, her voice soft. "He's glad you've been here." "I'm glad to be here," he said simply. It was the truest thing he had ever said. The boardrooms and billion-dollar deals of his old life felt like a dream from another lifetime. This small apartment, with the scent of baby powder and the quiet breathing of his daughter, felt like the only real place in the world. "This is hard, Walter," she admitted, finally looking at him. "Seeing you here, remembering everything. Sometimes I'm still so angry at you I can barely breathe." "I know," he said, his gaze unwavering. "You have every right to be. I don't expect you to forgive me, Kara. Maybe ever. All I can do is try to be the father Hope deserves." She looked at their daughter, her expression softening. "She deserves everything." She looked back at him. "What happens now? What is this?" It was the question that hung between them every day. They were not a couple. They were not just co-parents. They were something in between. Two people bound by a painful past and a precious, hopeful future. "I don't know," he confessed. "We're writing a new book, I guess, and we're only on the first page." He hesitated, then took a leap. "It's getting late. I can stay on the couch, just in case you need help with the night feeding." Kara looked at him, her eyes searching his. She saw no agenda, no manipulation, just a tired man offering his presence. She thought of the long, lonely nights ahead, of the overwhelming weight of being a new mother. She gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Okay, Walter, you can stay. It wasn't a declaration of love. It was not a promise of a future together. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was acceptance. It was a single, shaky step onto the new path they were forging together, a path not back to what they had lost, but forward to something they had yet to define. He had once tried to erase her, but now, in this small, quiet room, he had finally found his place in her story. Not as the villain, or even the hero, but simply as a man present on the page, ready to see what the next chapter would bring. The journey of healing is never a straight line. Can trust, once shattered, ever be truly whole again? What does redemption actually look like, day by day, in the quiet moments between the dramatic scenes? Walter and Kara's story is far from over. If you believe in second chances and the power of showing up, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, share it with a friend, and subscribe for more stories that explore the messy, complicated, and beautiful landscape of the human heart.